guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It's 9 o'clock, which means it's time for a Talk Magic. And I'm so excited that I've managed to get this guy on the channel. He is so busy. His schedule is insane. And he's managed to find time, which is awesome because he is, and I'm going to make a statement right now, he is the most entertaining mind reader I have ever watched. This guy is brilliant, super successful, really nice guy. It is, of course, the one and only Chris Cox. How you doing, Chris?
Hi, Craig. I'm assuming you've never seen Darren Brown based on that statement. Thank you.
But, but you're entertaining in a completely different way to Darren.
Yes, it's very much light entertainment, what I do, I suppose, where Darren does. No, I was going to say serious, but he's not. He's also at light entertainment, but my stuff is, a very different form of entertainment, I suppose.
And I was speaking about this with, I don't know if you know Dave Jones.
Yeah, I know of him, don't know him.
Well, he came on the channel and did an interview, and he said, I hate mind readers because it's always so boring and it takes them so long to get to the point. And he was very outspoken about it. And I think it's because a lot of the time with mind reading, a lot of people are copying Darren or they're copying Max Maven. And your style, I've never seen that style before with a mind reader. It is so unique. It's so different.
Thank you. Well, he's got to the point. His point is the same as mine. I hate mind readers. I find it so boring to watch. Most of the time, there's obviously exceptions to that. But the whole point for me was to make mind reading fun, and in my case, funny and a bit silly and stupid, and make the mind reading, look, it's all process, right? So it's to make that process as fun and entertaining as possible, because I don't want to sit there for 7 minutes just to get to a reveal. And once I made the decision in my head that I don't care that whether people think it's real or not, then I became a much better performer, because instead of relying on a focus and trying to present something as a real bit of psychology or this or that or whatever it is, I focused on what is a really funny and entertaining way to do this and let people go on that ride to get to that end reveal. Great, let's do that, because therefore we can add more reveals along the way. So it's like, there's a routine, you saw me do it. I do call Control Chris Cox, which runs 12 to 15 minutes normally. And in that routine, there's probably enough material to fill an hour show, without a doubt, in terms of the amount that I'm going through. But it's just pushing through it, because I I don't want an audience sat there twiddling their thumbs or just being like, come on, get on with it.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I've noticed. It is very machine gun. Your delivery is like boom, boom, boom. You're almost beating them up with mind reading, which is incredible. They haven't got time to process it.
It's relentless, and that kind of comes out of my character, which comes out of me, in that I am very, at least on stage, very energetic and a fast talker, and I like to rattle through things. And the truth is, probably some of the material would play a lot better if I took my time with it. But actually, I like just a barrage of mind reading thrown at them. So it feels like, kind of when I'm off stage, you sort of want the audience to go like, "Oh, that was exhausting, wasn't it?" In a good way. But particularly because my work is within multi-man magic shows or multi-human magic shows, where I've got my 10, 12, 15 minutes to come on and do my bit. I want it to feel as whirlwind-like as possible and as different from anything else in that show as possible.
So I want to, I'm going to get into this a little bit later on, but on that, I'll probably forget if I don't ask it now. When you present your own show and you're not part of a multi-man sort of extravaganza, do you slow down a bit? Or do you keep that same pace for the whole?
There's more peaks and troughs in it. There are bits which are slower. There are bits which are the exact same pacing that you've seen. There's tricks where maybe like a trick that in the Illusionists might run 12 minutes. And my own show probably will run between 17 and 20 minutes, just because I can put in all the stuff that I've cut out to keep it tighter for those shows. But the truth is, my last solo show I created in 2011, and I taught that through to 2015 or 2016 was probably the last time I did that. And that was a very different show to what I'm doing now. That was a one-man play with tricks, a narrative-based mind-reading show. So before the amazing director Gardio and his thing, this was a way to go, what is a theatrical form of mind-reading? And it was a kind of romantic comedy, me telling a story of boy meets girl with tricks along the way and trying to make the audience feel and see something different, but having those tricks as part of that. And what I do now has some of those tricks are in the sets that I do now, but the style of the character are totally different.
For sure, absolutely. And you know what? I want to, before we go any further, because we're referencing points in your career.
Yeah, we dive right in there, didn't we?
We just went straight in. Before we get there, just for anybody who doesn't know who you are, and I can't imagine there's anybody watching this that doesn't, let's just rewind a little bit and just very quickly talk about your origin story. It
Sure.
feels
And also,
like
by the way, I think a lot of the magic world, they don't know who I am because I'm not a, I am a person who loves magic, but I'm not really part of the magic world. I've been loved magic since I was a kid, but never went to conventions or societies or things like that. So I think, I'm, without wishing to sound big-headed, someone said to me the other day something. I was like, oh yeah, that's probably true. In that, I'm probably the most successful mentalist outside of Darren in the world, in that I played to 750,000 people, Broadway, 4 West End runs, the West End, my own TV show, those sorts of things. But I think a lot of the magic world probably don't know who I am, and maybe I'm sort of been trying to keep it that way because I kind of feel like maybe maybe the magic world won't like it or something. I don't know, but I just kind of feel like I'm always say I'm an entertainer who does magic more than a magician. So if you don't know who I am, that's totally fine.
Well, here's the thing, when Max Maven was on the scene, I remember every mentalist did a Max Maven impression. They were Max Maven. You couldn't be a mentalist unless you were Max Maven.
I would if I could grow a goatee. Sadly, I can't
do
do
it so well. But then Darren came on the scene, and everyone became a Darren clone. Like suddenly, it was psychological illusionist, and it was it was down that route. I haven't yet seen many people try to copy your style, so perhaps you're doing the right thing, because I haven't seen a million clones and just people trying to replicate what you do on stage.
Well, and partly that's because I think what I do, and I'm not someone who wasn't a Darren clone. Definitely my earlier stuff, Darren-esque without a doubt. And I spent a lot of I had a run-in with him years and years ago, and then spent a lot of my time working out how can I make what I do, which is the exact same in terms of method and sort of presentation and tricks as there, and how do I make it totally different and totally me? And that's what I focus my time and energy on, and it's why I love mentalism, because you can focus your time and energy on the performance more so than the methodology. I don't have to spend years practicing a sleight, which I'm never going to be any good at. I can just think about the performance of it. And for me, it was about finding myself, and then also thinking of what is it which is so inherently me that if someone were to copy it or take that bit, it just wouldn't really work for them. And part of that was to go, all right, well, I will be a mentalist too. For my first 3 Edinburgh shows, I didn't let anyone write anything down on stage. For then also my 3rd Edinburgh show, and then everything onwards, I'm a mentalist who tours with a load of stuff. It's not me and a couple of envelopes and pieces of paper. There's sets, there's all these things to make it look bigger. It's all those things of putting the effort in to try and make it feel as different and uncopyable as possible, I suppose.
Fantastic. But where did you all come from? Where was there? Obviously, you've been around forever, and you are right. You are probably the most successful mentalist outside of Darren. When did you find magic? What's your origin story, Chris?
So I can give you the real story rather than the story I give in interviews. In that, this is what I think it is. I remember getting a magic kit, Paul Daniels magic set, which actually is just behind me there. That very kit there is the kit I remember getting when I was maybe 6 or 7, and just liked doing magic. But the thing I really loved was performing. So I was a kid who would go to the theatre school at weekends, would be in the pantomimes, would be in shows, would write to TV shows to get on shows. So when I was younger and still in primary school, I was on Live and Kicking and The Biz and Run the Risk, and that was the thing I loved. I loved performing, I loved theatre, and I always liked magic as well. But I would go see my uncle and aunt in London. We'd go to Hamleys. I'd get to buy a trick. I remember I went on the Big Breakfast when I was maybe 11 or 12, doing a magic trick for them, which was one of Marvin's tricks. I'm sure I probably should have paid him money, but I didn't realize that at that age. Marvin, I'm not giving you any now. But I always loved magic, but loved performing more. But what I realized is I can't sing, can't dance, can't really act, and I'm not funny enough to do stand-up, even though I tried when I was younger. But I realized that magic and those other things and the ability to perform and entertain an audience put together, then that's my unique selling point. And I was lucky in that I got into magic young, and then I got into mentalism very early. So I was probably 14 or 15 when I first discovered mentalism. It was Max Maven's Video Mind series was the first thing I found. And then that kind of a year or 2 on coincided with Darren's first specials coming out. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, okay. I get, at first I fell into what I thought it was, which is what they were selling it to everyone. And then I was like, oh, actually, hang on, this is 13 steps, isn't it? This is that stuff. So I kind of, all of that melded together and realized quite quickly it was mentalism for me. And therefore, that's all I've ever really done. I know the basics of a lot of magic, but it's always been mentalism. So I kind of loved the Edinburgh Festival. I'd go up and watch comedians there and always wanted to do it. So I used my student loan in my final year of uni. I saved that up to go and do my first Edinburgh show, and that went well. And I just kept doing them.
That's amazing. Well, I've got a few questions based on that. Now, the first question is, I hear people all the time saying, when you're young, you shouldn't be a mentalist. 14-year-olds can't be mentalists. Now, I've got a lot of young people on this channel, I know from the demographics, and I've had this question asked me, can I be a mentalist? What, as somebody who became a mentalist at the age of 14, what's your viewpoint?
Yes and no. I certainly, I was actually quite lucky in that when I got into mentalism, I was doing psychology at school and was using things that I was learning in psychology as presentational hooks. And then, obviously, the Darren, Andy, Andrew, those guys hugely pioneered all of that. So I was like, oh, great, then that's how I'll present it. But very much, I look at early photos of me, and it's basically Darren. It's me trying to look like Darren. And I think I realized probably quite quickly that you can't do Darren if you're 14 years old. You can't pretend that you've got all these skills because you don't. So although I was doing it then, it was very much, if I look back at it now and go, yeah, people probably weren't buying it. But also now, then I maybe wanted people to think it was real. Now I don't care, so that makes a difference. But I'd say, if you're young now, use what is you to make that thing seem right for you. So, whether it's you are a fan of the DC or the Marvel universe and the powers of those, and you've taken some of the powers that different superheroes have and used that, you've learned about them and you studied them and you try to do that, or you're a real life superhero, any of those sorts of things. Find things, because no one's, is someone going to believe that you've had 10 years training in body language? Very unlikely if you're 10. Although if you did, well done. But I think it's fine. It's thinking about what is an audience going to buy, and sometimes that's telling them the right story, or but it also comes down to what do you want them to buy? What are you just trying to entertain them? You're trying to make them think it's real. You're trying to just perform a trick. Are you trying to find your character? All of those things feed into it. So the easy answer is actually you probably just need to try a lot of everything, and that's what I did. And I feel like a superpower you genuinely have when you're young, and I definitely had it, was you've got no fear and you don't care, and you just can go ahead and do it. And now I have all the fears of, oh, well, what if it's not as good as what I've done before? Or all the fears come into my head more than when I was younger. I didn't have a thought of fear. I just was like, oh, I want to do that. I'll go and do it. And that's the perfect opportunity to try, experiment, and fail, and learn from your failings.
That's fantastic. So we're in a situation now. You went to university, obviously, and through university, I'm assuming you carried on learning and performing and going out there. And you said you used your student loan to go to Edinburgh Fringe. So I'm guessing you've never had a quote unquote proper job.
Well, I have, weirdly. So I've never done close up. I've never done table hopping. I've never done walk around. I tried once or twice while I was at uni and was like, oh, it doesn't work with mentalism, or at least with what I was doing. And even now, if I'm offered those gigs, I'll never take them. I'll always send them to someone who's great at doing them. And there's always a bit that gets frustrated at magicians that I see who are, 95% of the time they'll do close-up table hopping and be amazing at it. And then we'll also be like, oh yeah, I do stage and cabaret. And you sort of go, well, then I see clips of it and I'm just like, oh, what's it live? And like, oh, all you're doing is what your close-up act on stage. And they're two very different worlds. In the same way, I don't do that well because I'm a stage performer. So I always wish magicians just thought more about, if you're going to do parlor or stage, you have to think it's not just your close-up act on stage. You have to think differently about that. But I did have a proper job for 10 years. In fact, the things I loved when I was younger were radio, magic, and theatre. And when the reason I could save up my student loan while at university was I was working at BBC Radio Bristol, working on the radio show every evening, answering the phones, producing it, that sort of thing. So I could save up my student loan because I was having a job that was paying for actual food and the ability to eat. And I, for 10 years, was a producer at Radio 1. And in fact, when I was shooting Killer Magic for BBC Three, I was still working at Radio 1. So I was doing 3 or 4 days a week in Glasgow filming, the other 3 or 4 days at Radio 1 in London. When I did my first West End run of Impossible, I was still at Radio 1. So I was doing 8 shows a week at Radio 1 and 5 days a week. 8 shows a week on stage, 5 days a week at Radio 1, plus an extra day working with Heston Blumenthal, which was my one supposed day off. When I do Edinburgh, I'd take off the month of August, go and do Edinburgh. When I tour solo, I'd work during the day, go and do the show that evening. I took off 9 months at one stage to go and do New Zealand and to write a new show and those things. So yes, but again, a radio producer is not a real proper job, but it was going into the office and doing it alongside performing.
I'm tired just thinking about that. I mean, my God. I mean, I get asked the question all the time on this channel, how do I become successful? I mean, I'm going to ask you this question later on, but I mean, from what you've told me already, it's just hard bloody work. Is that right?
Just work, yeah. Just work. Try and say yes to everything. Keep working, keep pestering, keep trying at it. Particularly when you're younger, because you don't have the fears and the responsibilities you get when you're older. But yeah, that's it. I mean, I regret to say no, I don't. I kind of part of me wishes I'd left Radio One earlier. Because I felt like I'd probably be further along in my career as a performer if I had. But I loved my time there, and worked with Matt Edmondson for my final sort of 4 or 5 years, who's one of my best friends, was my best man at my wedding, and he is a genius and also loves magic and is a member of the Magic Circle actually. So working with him was the right reason to stay there. But I left when I left because I was offered my first Illusionist gig, and I realised I couldn't do it. I didn't have enough time off to take from Radio 1 to go and do it, and was like, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. And I sort of wish I'd done that a bit earlier and given myself that risk, because suddenly I worked harder because actually no, it's weird. So I was going to say I worked harder because I wasn't working, which was partly true, because I was like, well, I need to pay for myself now. I've not got a nice salary that I'm sitting on. But also I think I worked yeah, honestly, I suppose I worked more when I was working full time and doing this than when I'm just doing this full time. And I think that's because I was in the cycle of just working, where now I'm very easy to procrastinate. And the joy of the radio station was it was a deadline, because the radio show was on every Saturday and Sunday. It's like, we got to do a show. There's no stopping it. Finish the show. Great. What are we doing tomorrow? Another show. Okay, good. So that momentum meant I was in a momentum of just churning stuff out. Where now, I'm thinking about creating new material, and it's a nightmare. I'm like, actually got to sit down and work. Oh my God.
You know what I find interesting about that is, up until you had the Illusionist gig, and we'll get to this later on, but up until that point, you still had this side gig that you were doing. You still had this this radio show that you were producing, which is incredible to me, because people would have looked at you pre-Illusionist and gone, oh, Chris Cox is amazingly successful. We see him on TV all the time. We see him in Edinburgh. He's smashing it. He's doing an amazing job. Nobody would have thought, oh, well, he's also got this part-time job that he's doing at the same time. I mean,
yeah, full-time job as well, not even part-time. Yeah, full-time proper job. Yeah, and it's weird. I think in the world of magic, like, I don't see myself as successful. I think I'm very lucky to do what I do, and I'm very fortunate, and I love doing it. But certainly the stuff I want to achieve, I haven't yet, and I'm still working towards that, whatever those things actually end up being. But yeah, I think I was very lucky to be doing an amazing job at Radio 1, and it was a great creative outlet, and I feel I'm a better performer because I was a producer, and I was a better producer because I was a performer. But it did just get to a stage, like, so I was just like, I did at one point, I think it's 178 days without a day off, and then was like, yeah, I probably need to sort my priorities out and actually have just focus on one thing for a bit.
That's crazy. So let me pick up on a couple of points you made before we move on. The one point I want to quickly pick up on and just expand on a bit is where you said that you wished close-up magicians would understand that performing on stage is a totally different thing. I get so many people saying to me on this channel, have you got any advice on transitioning from close-up magic to a stage show? Do you think people should do what you do, which is just focus on one area? Do you think it's possible to be a gigging close-up magician and a gigging stage magician? Because I've seen people, I mean, look at Sam Strange and Richard Young, your two friends who have an amazing stage show. For many, these days they're not doing as much close-up, but right up until a couple of years ago, they were still going out doing close-up jobs quite often. I mean, or do you think that, so I'm just interested in your thoughts.
It's a good question, because I can't give a personal answer because I never went on that journey. I very quickly realized that I was a performer on stage and I didn't like doing close-up. And, put me in front of 5,000 people and I'm very comfortable, don't care. Put me in front of 6 people around a table and I hate it. I'm terrible. I hate it. It's horrible. But that's who I am, so that's what I worked out. Young and Strange are great examples. Also, like Rob James, an amazingly successful close-up magician. His is one of my favorite Edinburgh shows that I saw. And that was many years ago, but he translated what he did to a stage performance, albeit in a small, more intimate environment, beautifully. And I think they are very different worlds, and I think the skills you have as a close-up magician are incredible, and I don't have any of those skills, but those skills are very different to the skills you need as a stage performer. or even, you know, parlor's quite a popular thing now. But the difficult thing is the only way to get good at it is to do it. You know, the reason I do well doing the shows that I do is because I have done shows forever, and every show you get better at. And each show, yeah, all of that flying time, and there's no real shortcut other than just doing it. And I suppose the kind of life hack on that is to surround yourself and potentially even at times pay for the right people to be around you, the right consultants, the right advisors, the right directors, you know, people who understand the world that you're learning about, because they will make you better. You know, I work with a lot of people that I bring on board at certain points when I'm trying to create new stuff, or just to give me those outside perspectives and help me, you know, all those thoughts early on help me refine my gut instinct. Just going out and doing it helps you refine your gut instinct, and it's also what your world is. So you know, I've seen more theatre than I've seen magic, and I love going to theatre. You know, when I was, you know, pre-pandemic, pre-touring all the time, like 2-3 times a week, I'd be in the West End or the Royal Court or the Donmar seeing something, and those are the things which have influenced my thinking more than anything else, and my gut instinct. So it comes from a more theatrical background. So therefore, it's right that it should be on stage, and also sort of fully knowing what my character is and seeing everything through that lens. But yeah, I think it's probably a case of, yeah, it's just, I think just starting with the thought of just doing what I do close up, even though it kills close up, isn't enough on stage. And I think that idea of that isn't enough, that's not good enough. Yeah, you can get by, but is it good enough? That's probably a good thought to have, and go, actually, okay, what's the next thought along the line? How do I make this more theatrical? How do I make it play bigger? How do I make it, you know, I think often, particularly in mentalism, people feel like, you know, and this is not a world, you know, I'm quite opposite to this, so this is very much one view, but I'm like, okay, well, how do I make it relevant to an audience? Oh, I know, I'll make them think about the first person they kissed, as if that makes it emotional and irrelevant. It doesn't. It's no different than thinking of their favorite color or any other sort of nonsense. And it feels just like, oh well, that's the shortcut for you. It feels like that's the shortcut for the thing you're trying to get to. But actually, you should focus into why are you thinking that? What are you trying to elicit there? Are you trying to elicit an emotional response from an audience? Okay, well, if that's what you're trying to do, take that idea and find a different way to do that and to play with that. So, you know, in my Fatal Distraction show, which was about love, there were points where I wanted an emotional connection. I loved the movie 500 Days of Summer. I wanted to create that style of a thing with an audience. And there's nothing which amazed me more on the first night of performance, when I'm telling the part of the story about the breakup. And every time I've been telling part of the story about the relationship, I've been bouncing a little Red Bull. And then when I get to the point of us breaking up, I say, she said, what's the line? It was something like, she said, this isn't working. And I said, oh, you should just change the batteries or something. And she went, no, not this. Us. We're not working. And at that point, I throw the ball and it doesn't bounce. And I hear the audience go, and they cared about me, and they cared about the story, and the magic just punctuated that moment, and they were invested at that point. And it didn't need me telling someone the name of their first kiss to get that emotional reaction. The emotional reaction came from them connecting with me. So it's, yeah, and you know, it's that thought process. It's thinking more. You just have to think bigger. I think that's it. It's like it can't be the effect. The effect is 10% of it. It's about the presentation and the performance, and that's what makes the difference between it being, you know, I think close up is all about the effect, and stage is all about the presentation. I suppose that thought process has led me to that conclusion. Whether it's right or not, I don't know, but that sort of feels like, whoa, the difference I see in it.
And what do you have any advice on characterization? Because you've got a very distinct character on stage. You've mentioned character a couple of times in this interview, and watching you on stage, you are like a ball of energy. It's very different. We said at the beginning, it's very different to any mind reader out there. A ball of energy, quite camp in many ways, very physical, and it's very you. People struggle to find a character on stage. We get told all the time, be yourself. But I mean, how do you be yourself? Have you got any?
Yeah. Well, I am not myself on stage. I'm very much a version of myself, and I know who that character is. And you know, my wife, you know, people, if they see the show and then chat to her, they'll be like, "Oh, he must be so much fun to live with." She's like, "Nope, grumpy and tired most of the time." I'm like, yeah, that's true. But that version of me on stage is probably who I wish I was. And you know, I kind of see that version. You picked up on a lot of kind of the key words that I think behind who that version of me is, and it sort of basically boils down to cartoon character comes to life. But trying to make it not, you know, not kids entertainer, not so annoying that you want to punch him in the face, although some people probably do. But just to undercut, particularly, you know, a lot of these sorts came out of the Illusionists and that big grand opening and that big that V poster and that's super cool. It's like, okay, well, how do I make my mark in a show where everyone's super cool and sexy? And it's like, okay, well, if I come out and just be a bit ridiculous and laugh at myself and be the underdog, then the audience will naturally gravitate to that because it's different. And also, I want, not that I do this, but if I was doing an off by one effect, I want the audience to be, instead of me going, oh, it was off by one, I want them to be going, oh, you were so close though. Well done. You were so close. You're off by one. I want them to love me. I want, I'm the puppy dog, basically. That they, someone's an idiot to me on stage. The audience turn on them rather than me. Because why are you being mean to the nice guy? I want them. The biggest laugh I get in the show comes a couple of minutes into my first routine, where I do kind of one of my first good, like proper strong reveals of something, and the audience respond accordingly. And then I just say, "And you thought I was gonna suck." And that's my biggest laugh, because genuinely, I think the audience are like, "Oh, this guy's going to be awful," but he seems nice. So I found that character, the character I had in the shows before that, there were elements of that to it. And what I realized is that I'm at my best when I'm off script, but on a structure and a kind of an ad lib within a world that I've created. So those things came into the character, and also looking at who I am, what I think the audience think of me, finding that out from people and audiences and what they expect of me. All of those things fed into it, and that idea of be you, isn't true for some people. You might be a boring person. And there's certainly sides of me that are boring, but there might be bits of you which aren't boring that you can elevate, or you might be able to find an actual character in the same way an actor inhabits a character. Like Jeff Hobson's a great example. He's very much a character. Yeah. His onstage persona is that character, and there are elements of Jeff within that, but hanging out with Jeff as normal Jeff and then Jeff as Jeff Hobson, you see those two differences. And Chris Cox on stage is different to who I am. And there's no shortcut to it, really. It's experimenting and finding and trying to find the things an audience gravitate to you. And, you are unique. It's sort of a cliche line, but the thing that makes your show unique is you. So it's finding those bits of you that are unique and different. And the things that you love should feed into your effects. I love theatre. I like film. I like comedy. I like food. Those things feed into my thinking of effects, and my performances around them are based on those things. And it's sort of giving yourself ground rules. Once you've found a character, you kind of give yourself ground rules. So for a long time, I didn't have my if I touch you or you touch me, we get a connection, we get into sync, and I can read your mind. That, alongside with I'm a mind reader who can't read minds, are the worlds I operate in. And from day one, my first Edinburgh show was Chris Cox, mind reader who can't read minds. So I was always playing with that idea. And then as I got into the Illusionists, I realized that was, in a short space of time, it was too complicated to explain that to an audience. So I went, all right, well, if I touch you, we make a connection, I can read your mind. Simple. Right, let's get on with it. And therefore, everything is built around the prism of what's a funny way to make a connection with someone, or at least it was. I've sort of waffled around this world, but it kind of, all of those bits are all come out of the character, and they aren't thoughts that I've just had. They're thoughts that have come out of me doing this for like 20 years, I suppose now, nearly. And they each thought progresses, and each thing you do, you look, you reflect, you analyze, and you find the things that work, and you take them, and you find the things that work, and you take them, and it's always a journey. I look back at stuff, even stuff I did on Killer Magic or Chris Cox's Mind-Boggling Magic, and some of those were only a few years ago, right? I look back and like, oh, that wasn't great. But at the time I thought it was fine. I thought it was probably okay at best, but good enough. But you constantly refine and change things. And like I said to you actually earlier, there's a video of some of my stuff in the Illusionists that I showed you, so you got a sense of it. And it's about it's a year, real world year, actual world 2 years, because last year doesn't count, away. And I'm like, oh yeah, actually within that year of continuing doing shows, there's so many little differences that happen just from doing it. So yeah, I think your way to find your characters is analyze yourself, perform a lot, work out what the things about you which are interesting and people seem to gravitate towards, and highlight them. And also look at what other people are doing. Like, the actual shortcut on this is I looked at everything and went, what's Darren doing? Great. How do I do it totally differently? What am I going to do that he would never do? Is he going to lick someone's earlobe? No, great. I'm going to lick someone's earlobe.
But that's the thing. I've never seen you do a routine that everyone else is doing. You don't really go out there and do marketed effects. You go out there and you create your own routines. You create your own set pieces.
Well, it depends on the show. So like Illusionists, very much it's all my stuff. You see my like crew set that I used to do for Disney, you'll see there's like 40% my stuff, 60% marketed, my versions of marketed effects.
Right.
But again, it's where you position yourself. It's like in the Illusionists, marketed effects, they're not going to cut it. That's not going to make them go, we want to book this guy. In a cruise show, my version of marketed effects are totally great when I've got to fly on with one suitcase and do those things.
Absolutely.
But yeah. I just didn't want to think. Yeah, you to think that I create everything. I don't. I very much try to create material which no one else is doing, and that comes
but
from.
even when you do a marketed effect, you spend time making that your own. You're not just going to take the exact same script of somebody else and just do it ad infinitum. You're going to inject your own character into it. You're going to kind of think, how would Chris Cox present this? How would this work for me?
Exactly, and like a good example of that is I kind of have a reveal that I do at the end of my Control Chris Cox routine, which it's been around in various guises since an Edinburgh show. I forget which, maybe my third or fourth. And it's a ridiculous reveal where it's the end of it, and I know that it can get me a definitely forced standing ovation. Very much forced. But I know an audience will go with it, and I know the most important thing is that it gets a visceral reaction from the audience. They forced to respond in a certain manner. Whether or not the trick hits, whatever happens at that point, I know how they're going to respond, which mentalism lacks a lot of. It's more often a reveal will be like, oh, that was clever, wasn't it? Yeah, oh, we should clap. That's the convention. Where I get them going, like that is the response I want them to get. So I create that response. So for example, on my set I do for when I do Disney Cruise Line, I have that ending. So I go, okay, I know I can do that. I know that gets a good response. And then I was like, right, how do I do it in this world? And I tried lots of things and I ended up going, actually, the right answer here is color match. Like, color match works for that ending. Mm-hmm. And I tried all sorts of variations on how to present and perform color match, which were me. And I realized the limitations are... That trick is amazing, but it's limited by its method in that there's sort of only one route you can really go. Yeah. And the thing I hate and find frustrating with mentalism is that process is boring, and unfortunately that trick has a lot of process. So after trying all sorts of variations on it in various forms, what I realized was the best way for me to do it was literally to go, and I do it this way, I go, okay, I want to do one more thing, we're nearly out of time, so as quick as you can, quickly grab these pens, okay, pick up a pen. So the whole presentation is, we're nearly out of time, I want to show you one more thing.
Yeah.
And that way I can rattle through it quickly. It allows the audience to realize I'm just rushing through it, and therefore it's not adding extraneous details to what inherently is a very dull process. I mean, I don't think it's the right answer for now. I don't think it's solved it for me as to what I want that to become, but actually it works in that instance. And that thing just comes out thinking your way of doing it. So, and within all that, it's all within the character of me, and they're coloring a ridiculous picture of me, and I know that the end result is going to be worth the little journey to get there. So all those things are kind of I kind of have to work in tandem. So I don't mind if I have to have a little bit of boring process, as long as the end's really worth getting there, then I will be okay about that. But if the end's not going to be as good, then that process needs to be more interesting and more fun.
That's amazing.
I don't know whether that answered the question. I've never really thought of it in that depth before, but I suppose
it really did. Let me ask you a question. When do you pinpoint your big break? So going back a little bit to you're working as a producer, this is way before The Illusionist. When did you kind of think, right, okay, this is catapulted me into the next level? Was it Killer Magic, which I think was your first TV thing? Was it an Edinburgh show? What was it?
Good question, because it's funny you say that, and I don't feel I've had my big break.
But I feel that here, Chris, any magician that's watching this or mind reader, you've toured with The Illusionists. Of course. I mean, you are by any definition successful. Now, you're a very ambitious person, so your level of success is probably not where you want to be.
And it changes also. I achieve the thing I want to achieve, and then I'm like, oh, okay, what's the next thing? And what's the next thing? That is, I can never enjoy the thing that I'm doing. It's always what's next and what's next. But I suppose also, I think there's a showbiz myth that, and for some people this may be true, but almost it's like getting the call and going, you've won the lottery. It's like, we're giving you a TV show. That moment, Richard Young talks very nicely about this, actually. And in his Magician's podcast, he used to mention it. It's like, that moment doesn't really exist, or very rarely exists. Like, I never got a call that said, great news, you're doing Killer Magic, it's happening. it was a long 2-year process of like, it may happen, it maybe not be. Okay, yeah, great, we're going to film a pilot. Okay, looks like we might film a pilot. Okay, I've got a call sheet. That means I'm doing it. Okay, right, we're doing that. It might go well. Okay, we're going to go. So it was always like each, it's never like one thing. It's all, your life's all changing. And also it comes at how you, I suppose it comes from how you interpret this stuff. I am, I'm used to a lot of rejection. There's more things I've not done than I have done in my career. So I, particularly my younger days, that used to really affect me. There are a lot of things I did, particularly out of early Edinburghs, which then never saw the light of day, or things that could have happened and didn't, and they were gutting. So I kind of built up a defense mechanism. I don't really get excited about stuff, which is the shame, because I miss that. But also I know it protects me, so I can be like, all right, well, that didn't happen. That's a shame. And even like, we're a couple of weeks away from Wonderville happening, and touch wood, it'll happen. But there's always a bit of me that goes, it might not. And even when doing it, I'm like, I might close tomorrow. And I think that sort of, when I was doing Broadway, there's a very sad part that I couldn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to, because I spent the whole time going, this will be the last, I'll never get to do this again. But in terms of Big Break, yeah, there's not like, there isn't one. So everything is a journey, and it's one thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing. So, I can pinpoint Anthony Owen casting me in Killer Magic on BBC Three to kind of 3 major reasons why that happened. One is, after my first Edinburgh show, I got a meeting with Anthony Owen by pestering him, had a meeting with him, said, I want to be a mind reader on TV. He said, I've got Darren Brown, I don't need you, but I'll keep an eye on what you're doing. I went, I need to be different to Darren then. Okay, and kept working and kept in touch with him and kept pestering him. And, so that was the start of that journey, was maybe 8, 9, 10 years before Killer Magic happened. Second thing is Alan Hudson, who mentioned to Anthony Owen when he was looking at casting people for it that I would be good for it. And reminded Anthony of me. So, knowing Alan, knowing him from Edinburgh, helping him with his Edinburgh shows, him helping me, those sort of things, networking, connecting with people. And then the other thing is the Alan Tyler, who was the commissioner at BBC Three at the time, had seen me in an Edinburgh show. So knew who I was when he was like, oh yeah, I've seen him. Yeah, he's great. That would be good. So those things probably led to Killer Magic happening. Plus me having all this stage time and all this material in the bank, to be able to, when we got into that process, have all this stuff ready to go. Before that, I'd done a couple of other TV spots, and they came out of, doing Edinburgh, PRing myself, pestering people like I used to do as when I was a kid to try and get on things. And, they led to other things. So, the illusion Impossible was first. That came about in the West End, and I was cast for that because Anthony Owen directed that. So I have a lot to thank Anthony for, and it's always weird to say his name and think that he's not here at the minute, not in the minute, like forever. And it's always a very sad thing, but I have a lot to be thankful for him, and I think he'd be very proud of what I've done, and I made my stuff very different because of a lot of things and advice he gave me. So he was a great loss to the magic world, and to the world in general. But also, it all, so I did Impossible, and then I remember Impossible, shortly after that, I got an email from the Illusionists doing a date check for me. And I assumed, and still assume, I never really know, but I assumed someone had come to see Impossible. And I genuinely replied to that email saying, are you sure this is for me? Because I'd never had contact with them, didn't expect to be in that show, never thought I would be the right act for them, but they saw something in what I was doing. And I kind of was the B team for the Illusionists. They had their main shows running on Broadway, and then I was off doing a version of a show in Cancun with people who'd not really done that show before. And that went well. I did like 2 or 3 weeks, I think that run was. And then so that was why I left Radio 1, and I came back and I pretty much did no work for 6 months. And I worked on ideas, and I got good at cooking. And I watched a lot of Netflix and played around with things, and kind of was, I think, I was re-touring. I managed to book another touring for the Edinburgh show that I'd already done, the Fatal Distraction thing, so I knew I had that. But also stayed in contact with the Illusionists and kept in touch with them. And I'd done Killer Magic by that point, so then that was starting to air at that point, and then some corporate things were starting to pick up. But I just stayed in touch with the Illusionists, and then an opportunity came up to do, pretty much a year later, after my first gig with them, to do South Africa. And that only came up because I think it was because Colin Cloud was doing the US tour, and they needed another mentalist. And therefore came to me. And, in fact, actually, when we mentioned earlier that sort of successful mentalism things, of course, Colin's totally up there. He's doing amazing things in Vegas with Shin Lim now. And that kind of goes without saying. But I think, so I got to do that South Africa tour with the Illusionists, and I just worked my ass off to make sure I was as the best version of me I could be, and both of that comes on stage and off stage. You know, I've worked with people at Radio 1's producer who are a nightmare to work with, and work with people who are great to work with, and I know which ones I say, hey, can we get them back to work with? So I make sure that I go out of my way, not go out of my way, I just make sure I'm the nicest version of me I can be, and work as hard as I can and let it show on stage. And you know, in that instance of a show, I was lucky that Terence, who's one of the production managers on the Illusionists, and then Mark Kalin, who's integral to that show, and you know, Dave Williamson, actually, they were all on that tour, and they all, I think, particularly Mark, bless him, fed back good positive things about what I was doing, and from that kept getting booked, and I kept getting booked and kept getting booked, and you know, touch wood, will continue to get booked. And I think the reason is because I offer something different. It is a totally big breath of fresh air within that show. It brings much needed levity at times. It brings humor without it being a comedy magician. It brings really strong mind reading. It fills the stage. It looks different. It feels like a unique proposition. And it wouldn't have felt like that unless I got on that journey to get there. So yeah, I don't even remember what the original question was and whether I even answered it, but it was nice to go down memory lane.
Well, I completely agree with what you're saying, and I'm going to give you the biggest sort of compliment I can possibly give anybody, which is your role in the Illusionists, and the role that you play reminds me very much of Hobson in the Carnival of Wonders.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you.
It really does, in that they come for the spectacle, but what they remember is the interaction that you bring, and I really do think that. And you know,
that's so kind.
There's so many parallels there.
No, that is really nice, and you know, yeah, maybe you're right. You know, I hadn't thought of that as a connection point, but yeah, that is the thing, and it's, you know, it all comes down to thinking what makes me different to anything else. And actually, I could be totally wrong here. But from a lot of what I see, I don't think people ever have that thought. They go, I know how to do a trick, so I can show off and impress people with that, and think that's enough. And for me, that's very much, you know, that's not even the first point of thinking. My first point of thinking is to take that and think, what's the first idea? And that equally is where a lot of people will stop. And then I go, okay, that idea is not good enough. Now, where do I go with this? And then I continue on that process. And, you know, it's easy for me to say now because I'm being lazy and haven't really created any new material for a while. But I look at like my dressing room effect, which I started in 2008, I think maybe that was the first version of that, or you know, the thing I used to do with touch typing, or the kind of touchy things, or the licking and all those stuff. You know, they all have genesis in early Edinburgh shows, and I took bits and made them bigger and better. But you know, the dressing room trick, I look at it now and look at what it once was, and it's a totally different thing. Yeah. But inherently, you can still sum up the exact same trick in one sentence, and it still started with the same point of thought, which was. It all came out of an Edinburgh show I was doing, which the premise was, what would I do if I could really read minds? And one day I went to the Apple store wearing the exact same color t-shirt as the people working in the Apple store, and got bombarded with questions and left the Apple store. I was like, oh, that's quite funny. If I was a real mind reader, I wouldn't have worn that. So that's not really a trick. Oh, but a fun trick would be, what if they got dressed up and I got dressed up and we were wearing the exact same thing? And instantly, visually, that appealed to me. And it's like, okay, I can see that on stage. And actually, the first versions for the first Edinburgh run, you could see both things happening. But what I wanted was that you saw both things happening at the same time. And then I talked about this idea of like getting good people in to help you. I spent some of the best money I've ever spent getting Andy Nyman in for an interview, not for an interview, Andy Nyman in for a couple of days consulting. And one of the first things he said was like, the problem with that trick is at the end of a trick, the reveal is for one person. So I'm like, oh yeah, of course it is. It's for the one person who's been getting dressed and hasn't seen what I'm wearing. So we cover them up, and suddenly I'm like, oh yeah, suddenly solved the major problem with that trick. And you know, I don't think have got the life I have out of that trick, or done the stages I've done with that trick without that very astute point of thinking that you need someone who's not you to give you that thought.
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing that I've noticed about your performance, and you mentioned it there, is it is very visual, which you don't normally see with mind readers. There's so much going on. It's colorful. You fill the room with props. You film the stage with props. It's a spectacle. But you hear so many mind readers these days talking about propless mentalism.
And it's a real bugbear.
Yeah, the only way to be a real mind reader is to not have props and blah, blah, blah. And that I hear that all the time. And you've
And it
got
all
more
comes.
than anyone.
I've got so many props. You know, I remember turning up to a show. It was a Peter Clifford show in Bristol, and Pete Wardell was on the bill, and was amazed that I had a van and was just constantly bringing like more and more set and props through. He's like, "Oh, you just meant to have a couple of envelopes and a piece of paper." And like, yeah, I think that inherently is the difference between me and a lot of acts, and may well be the reason why I do what I do and they do what they do. But propless mentalism. What is that? When you look at it, why would an audience want to pay? Sometimes Illusionists it's like $250 a ticket, and yes, they're getting the big production, but it's like, do they want to just come and see a guy on stage with nothing else there? Yeah, yes, they'll go and see a stand-up do that, but is anyone really coming to watch a mind reader and believing it's a real mind reader? Do you like? And maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know, but my opinions on it, they're not. And I don't care. What the fact there's a prop. Does that make the trick less entertaining? Normally, because then you've got to go through some convoluted, boring process to do the thing. Where actually, just get the prop and do it with the prop and do it in 2 minutes, because it's a much more the propless thing. The idea of being a real mind reader. I'm very much like I said, I don't care that people think it's real or not. It doesn't bother me. It's not what I'm there for. But I don't think that is an entertaining thing to watch. Is to see someone who's supposedly doing it for real. And maybe there is a way to make that entertaining. I don't think it's a very different form of entertainment. There's an idea I've been exploring for a play, which plays with that idea of well, what if someone thought it was real? And I think it works within a world of fiction and narrative, but it just to me feels inherently dull. And I would never go out on stage. And I could be wrong. I may not have found the right bit of material, but I've seen a lot of the propless stuff and those things. It's like I would never go put that in front of a real paying audience. Because I just think it's, A, if there's any chance it might go wrong, there is no way I'm doing that. And B, there is no producer who would book you to do a show where there's a chance it might go wrong. Because that's on them.
A friend of mine, Steve Della, says that, he hates propless mentalism. And he says, you owe it to the audience to do the best possible show you can do. And if that involves having tons of props, then if that's the best way to present the show, then that's what you need to do.
And and I'm not talking, I'm not talking about massive, obviously magic-y props. I think there is, the right prop for mentalism, but those props need to be either, if they are methodological props, they need to be invisible or fit within the world of what you're doing. And then for me, it's about having big props that fill the stage, which make it more than just a guy reading your mind and standing there going, you're thinking of this, correct? Good. Sit down. Next person. It's and weirdly, having said that, actually Steve does a great example. He's a fantastic magician and really brings his all. And I remember doing shows for Steve years and years ago at Brighton's Comedia. He put on a night there, and I'd go and do. The reason I do this trick I do, which I don't do on the Illusionists, I kind of do in my corporate set, which involves a word being on the back of my T-shirt. That I remember in those shows of Steve's, I was playing around with that trick and finding out those things. So I'm very grateful to him for those opportunities. Particularly when I was very young at the time. Sorry, what I was saying was, what was I saying? Something about propless mentalism and how I hate it. That's it. Yeah. The idea, actually, I've got my dressing room trick, which is massive and fills the stage, and then I've got my control routine, which is my version of a Q&A. And actually, it is just me on stage when I think about it. But I think to an audience, it doesn't feel like that because A, their faces are being projected behind me, but also there's so much of me running in the audience, and every part of it has a different moment with a prop or something, and there's all these bits and routines built along it that they're probably now I think about it, there are quite a lot of props in it, but not big props, but they're just things that give you, people remember visually more than they remember what they hear. Talk to anyone about going to see The Lion King in the West End, and they'll talk about the opening, which is one of the most visual spectacular moments in the West End. You think about years ago, people talked about Les Mis, they talked about the barricades, they talked about Miss Saigon, they talked about the helicopter, they talked about Phantom of the Opera, they talked about the falling chandelier. People remember what they see. So with mentalism, most mentalism, there's not much to see other than maybe, yes, my drawing matched with your drawing. So from quite early in Edinburgh, I was like, right, how do I make this look different?
That's great. Well, let's talk about your control routine for a minute, on one specific part of it, because it's amazing, as is the rest of your act. But it brings up a question that's on the lips of a lot of magicians and mentalists at the moment, and I think you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, mind reader, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your style is very physical. Like in a 10-minute show, you'll be licking people's ears, you'll be sticking your fingers into people's ears. In the control routine, you've got that moment where someone takes a drink and then you're taking the drink from their bottle, and it's very physical. And we're now in a world where people are scared of being physical with each other. And to be clear, I don't think this is going to be a thing that's going to last forever. I think that
I hope not.
Yeah, at some point soon we're going to get. I don't want my kid to grow up in a world where he can't hug each other. But at the moment, we're in a situation where getting a volunteer up on stage and doing what you would normally do might turn an audience against you, or might go, "Ooh, like,
yeah,
how are you going to deal with that?"
It's difficult, and actually, you've caught me at an interesting time because I'm currently working through that process. So, we were in the middle of the Illusionist tour when the pandemic hit. So March 16th, we were in Oklahoma City, and we were going to do one more show at some arena in just outside Texas, and then we were having a week off, and then the rest of the tour. And the arena show got cancelled, and then the rest of the tour got cancelled. So within that last week, every day was more people in masks and more of a concern among the audiences. And every day I was like, do I need to cut this bit? Do I need to change it? I was like, all right, I'm just going to feel it in the moment, because it sort of progresses from what my connections with people are. So and each time I kept them all in, actually, and they were all fine, but I needed certain tension relief laughs to make a moment not make, was aware when an audience were feeling maybe about to feel uncomfortable and could tension break that moment. So like kind of just being aware of that. So now I'm in the process of going, all right, so we're back on stage in a couple of weeks' time. And at the minute, we still don't know, as we're recording this, what audience participation we can do. So I still don't know whether I can actually do my act at all, or whether I need to write a whole new material for it. But we're starting to come up with what are my ways of doing my act in a COVID secure way. So both is safe and appears safe. And sometimes those are two different things. The most important thing is that it is safe. You actually feel, in our thinking, like we actually need to make it look safer than it needs to be to allow an audience to be comfortable. And I'm thinking about ways to do that, but very much, that thought of going like, if I touch you and you touch me, we make a connection, we get into sync, and I can read your mind. So it's time to touch me. Inherently, I'm in two minds as to whether I present that and go, this is what I used to do, and then the old pandemic's ruined me, and then the routine is built around those bits exist, but they're built around more COVID secure ways of doing them. So the humor comes out of the fact that I can't do the thing I would normally do. So now how do we do it in a funny and safe way? It may be that I cut all of that completely and go to a slightly different and sort of thing I used to do, which was various little sort of some question things and some physical things that I'd get them to do as a kind of way of doing that bit of process, which was still fun. So it may end up there. There are definitely bits I probably can't do. I probably can't do the bottle of water bit at the minute, even though the risk is on me. But even simple things like that routine is built around people filling in cards and putting them in a box on stage before the show begins. Like, can we get them to queue up and come and put envelopes in the box on stage? The first thing I do is take an envelope out of the box and I lick it. I mean, I've never thought twice about that being a dangerous thing. Probably always was in terms of germs. But now I'm like, oh, that laugh, which is a bit of a laugh, is now probably just oh my God, is he? So even those things, a lot of this is still me thinking it. And the truth is, I'm probably not going to know the answer until I start doing it, and have to trust that my instincts are strong enough and I'm good enough with an audience to be able to read that and play it correctly and learn from them, and create those ways of doing those things which maybe aren't necessarily. It's even like I used to do a thing where I thought, I haven't done it for a while, where someone would blow up a balloon and then I'd bang the balloon against my head to get their thoughts in my mind, and then I'd end up popping the balloon and breathing in the breath. I was like, oh, I can do that. And I was like, oh, no, I can't. That's actually the most dangerous thing possible, is to breathe in someone's expelled air. But it's going to be interesting to see where I land on this and where society lets me land. And, things are slightly different, I think, in the theatre. And we don't want people to be constantly reminded of the world we're in, but we know they're in that world. So it's kind of a little bit of a safe haven. But I don't really know. I sort of feel like I know all is good in the world when I'm doing the bottle of water bit again. As we're like, ring the bell, everything's good. Cox is drinking their spitty water again. Everything's safe. But interestingly, it's like there's the Illusionists is out in Kansas City, an open air theatre in July that I can't do because I'm not allowed in the country. Not just me, the whole of the UK aren't allowed in the country. So I've got the alternate me who's trained up, who does my act for me when I can't do it. So he's going out and doing it there. We were talking about this the other day, and there are no regulations and rules there. It's a maskless audience because it's outdoors, and they can do. They said this is what we normally do, and they're like, yeah, that's fine, you can do it, but we're considering, okay, how will the audience react, and how do you play that? I think it's a thing you have to think a lot throughout your career of how is an audience going to think about this, and you're constantly, it's like there'll be jokes I do one year, and then a year later it feels like, oh, that joke doesn't fits quite right with society these days, and that point of refinement and thinking. I suppose it all comes down to all of this. Like, I just got to think about it a lot, and I'll try and come up with something.
Now, I want to talk about Wonderment, but before we do, I just want to backtrack and just pinpoint one thing that I wanted to mention. Way back in the interview, you talked about getting on Killer Magic, and you talked about you actually used the term networking, and you specifically mentioned Alan Hudson and networking with people, so your name got put forward. But at the very beginning of the interview, you were like, magicians don't know who I am. I'm like the best kept secret in which is true. So how can you, like, you got recommended by magicians, but at the same time, you don't hang around magicians.
So the magicians I know and I'm friends with, pre-Illusionists, the magicians I know and I'm friends with, the reason I know and I'm friends with them is because of Edinburgh.
Okay.
So either they did shows in Edinburgh or came to see my show, or vice versa, and we got connected to them. So Alan, I got to know in Edinburgh when he did his show with Kev. Rob James, I think I'd briefly met in Bristol before, but knew when he did his Edinburgh show. Noel Quarter, Edinburgh, like those, like the people I know, kind of through those people, and then through Edinburgh. That's, I think, my connection to them, and then that extends into the magic world. So like Andy and Preston Nyman, I know through the world of theatre and Edinburgh. And then like now, I'm lucky that the magicians who are my friends now are the magicians I've performed with. So, like Mark Kalin or Hobson or Jonathan Goodwin or Dave Williamson or any of those people, Paul DeBeck, those people who I've done the Illusionists with, them become friends. But equally, I think all of them, and actually there maybe some of those are exceptions to the rule. But yeah, I kind of think I suppose there's not someone I massively associate in a friendly manner with that I've met just through magic.
Okay.
It's always been something alongside it.
And before we talk about Wonderment, would you ever go down the route of lecturing, or the reason I ask this is because just in the last hour of speaking to you, you have so much knowledge. You know so much. You could give so much to people, but obviously, doing a lecture or some sort of course online or a product to magicians, that's going to take time and effort that you would probably focus elsewhere. But I know I'm going to get these questions in the comments. You've never released anything commercially?
No, I haven't, and it's very kind of you to say, actually, because one of the reasons I haven't is because I don't think I've got anything to say. And actually, maybe I do, and but I suppose the thing is, I often think the stuff I think is like, oh well, that's just common knowledge. Maybe isn't common knowledge, and it's only common knowledge to me because I've spent my time learning that knowledge. So it's interesting. Maybe I'll just go back through this and be like, right there's the book. Someone transcribe that. But also, yeah, I suppose to a lot of extent, it's like I don't feel I've got anything to offer, and it's Emperor's New Clothes to some extent. I always feel like, when I've been to like the session, which is incredible, I always feel like the things that people love are the things where people just show a lot of tricks and teach them, and I haven't really got any tricks to show or teach, because it's not like I don't want you doing my material, B, I don't want to release my material, and C, it's not like I'm coming up with the world's most ingenious methods. I think there's some really smart methods that I use, and I think great mentalism is just loads of stuff layered on top of each other. But I'm not coming up with anything new, which is just going to be like, oh, that's the hot trick to buy. But maybe there is stuff that I can, thoughts which people find interesting or useful. I kind of feel maybe there's not, but I suppose it's just because I come at stuff from a slightly different angle, and maybe if I just thought about what is it that people might want to know and try and explain that. I don't know. It's a nice thought. I've often, I kind of feel like if people get in touch with me, I'm always happy to give advice, and I love like chatting to you and this, and I'm flattered to be asked, and kind of feel like, oh, that's where I can. Because all I'm doing really is just giving my thoughts and opinions. That's all it is. And who's to say mine are more valid or less valid than anyone else's? They're just mine. But maybe there's something someone can take out of them, because maybe I've been there and done that, or at least had the thought process to go through that to work out where I'm getting on it.
Mm-hmm.
But if anything, the only thing I'm flogging are I Love Cox merch, available now.
There you go. I'll buy one of those. And that brings us to Wonderville. So where did this come about? You are, I mean, let's be honest, we're in a situation where live theatre is just opening up. And yours is one of the very first shows that's kind of spearheading that return to normality. And obviously you've spent years doing things with the Illusionists, but this is your own kind of creation, so to speak. I'm correct in saying that.
Kind of. Yeah. So it's sort of a weird. Why is it weird? I don't know. We'll find out. It's a thing. Around this time last year, I was chatting to a good friend of mine. He's a producer called John Webb Carter, and he's always loved magic. And we're talking about, oh, it'd be good to try and maybe get a magic show on if we can. But it wasn't a magic show. Actually, it was always very much a magic and variety type thing. And actually, it all came to a conversation we had where the point I made at that point was that there's all these people like me who've spent their lives and careers working to entertain people and create a craft, a skill, a bit of performance, and they need an audience to do that with, and they've not had that opportunity. So it's like, well, what if we put together a show that gave people that opportunity? And that was sort of a starting point. And then we looked at doing something at Christmas time, and I got a little solo show booked in, which all got cancelled at the last minute. But we looked at doing this then, it didn't quite happen. And then we looked at doing it for February kind of school holidays. And again, that all got cancelled. And then, we were offered the theatre for the summer, which was, incredible. And, the amazing people at NIMAX Theatres are supporting people like John and Stephen and Piers and our producers who are, kind of brand new producers, and they're supporting getting them on because, in the real world, we wouldn't be able to get this theatre and we wouldn't be able to get this time slot and all those things. But they're really all about spearheading and getting these new producers to come and do something to bring audiences back into the theatre. So it kind of came out of that, and it's, I've been lucky enough to be involved in it from the get-go and, work out what acts are right for it and work with a director on the style and the theme of the show. And we don't want it to feel like any of those amazing other shows that I'm in, and want it to be it very much feels to me like it's a right here, right now show. It is a celebration of skills people have to show off to audiences and audiences that want to be entertained. And it's a love letter to theatre and the idea that there is, to me, no more magical feeling than sat in a theatre with a couple of thousand people at the same time feeling the same thing, watching someone perform something for us just here, right now. That's life. That is, to me, incredible and magic. And that idea that for the last 18 months, these theatres have been closed and we're bringing them back to life, that is all inherent within the soul of the show. And also it's just a fun chance to be like, here's some amazing acts and some amazing magic and some real fun things that we can go and forget about the last year with. So it's kind of, it's all about kind of celebrating in a kind of slightly vaudevillian theatrical way the joy of magic and live theatre.
So for those people who haven't heard of Wonderville, where is it running? Where can you get tickets from? And who is on the bill? Who have you managed to bring together for this?
So it is running at the Palace Theatre in London's glittering West End, which is normally where you'll find Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. So we're playing on that amazing stage, and we've got our own set and stuff on it because we can't use any of their stuff. So we're there. We open around the 15th or 16th of July. I never really know, one of those 2 days, and run to the end of August. And we're doing, at some point, we're doing up to 10 shows a week. So, 2 shows most days. So very much a family-friendly show. So a show for everyone from grandparents through to kids, through dates, through to work parties, a chance to go to the theatre and experience some magic. So you've got me, who knows what I'm doing. We'll discover in the next few weeks, depending on what I'm allowed to do. I've got brilliant Josephine Lee, who is an impossible with me. Wonderful female, strong magician, doing some amazing stuff. You've probably seen her on Britain's Got Talent. We've got Young and Strange, who I'm delighted to be getting to give them their kind of West End debut with all their amazing illusions and their lightheartedness and the fun and comedy of everything about this show is them, me, it all brings together. We've got Ed Hilsom, who goes without saying, triple Magic Circle champion. He's going to do his amazing dove act and some other bits, and then we've got depending on when you come see the show, we've either got Simone or Maz, who are both different but similarly talented in terms of hula hooping and roller skating and like proper variety, like true energy, amazing, something for everyone. You'll see and be like, wow, that was, something totally different. And then also, we've not actually announced this yet, but there'll be, fingers crossed, a guest spot as well. So every week there'll be a different act coming to join us that, that we want to showcase their talents and be part of their story and share their story with an audience. So we're trying to make sure that the show, it's very important for us to make sure that that show is diverse and reflects a modern Britain. And a modern society, and people can identify with versions of themselves on that stage. Because I want to see, I love in these shows getting to see kids who maybe this is their first trip to the theatre, and I want them to see someone like them on stage and be like, oh, I could do that when I'm older.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Tickets, what's the URL?
Yes, they are available, very much available. So you can get tickets at nimaxtheatres.com, which is NIMAX theatres.com. They're all the tickets there and all the details about it right there.
Fantastic. Now, let me throw an ethical dilemma in for you.
Please
Let's just say that Wonderville becomes hugely successful and they want to run it all over the world. And then the Illusionists come knocking again and say, Chris, we need you back. What do you do?
It's literally my worst fear. I mean, what a wonderful position to be in. It's my worst fear. I don't know. Who's paying the most is probably the answer. I think that I don't know is the answer. I don't know what. I think there would be things you would weigh up on each one. I'm very aware that I have a young family, and for me, getting to spend time with them is very important. I'm also lucky in that I have Cox II, who can go and do the act. And so therefore in theory I could do both at the same time. When I was doing the West End with the Illusionists at the same point, Wes was doing my act in Reno, where I just left and was taking that over. So double Cox all the time. What a joyous position that would be in. I would be in to be given that opportunity. We really would know the world is in a good place by then. Also, I suppose the answer also comes down to where are they playing? Does that seem like a nice place?
Very true.
See the world for me. I like getting to travel.
That's fantastic. Well,
yeah. Who's doing the Antarctica tour? I haven't been there yet.
Would you really want to? This has been an amazing interview. We're going to wrap things up, but I want to ask you one last question, which is a question that I ask everybody, which is, what's next? Because you've just said over and over again in this interview, you're never happy. You hit a goal, you set a new goal, you set a new goal, you set a new goal. So what's left on your magical bucket list that you haven't yet hit?
It's a good and terrifying question because I sort of don't have an answer. But also, I don't think I've ever really had an answer for that. And I think the reason, actually, no, I probably did years ago. But I think the reason I don't have a specific answer for now is because I really like what I'm doing. And my pre-pandemic, my plan, if there is a plan, was to continue doing the Illusionists. And I knew roughly what the next year or so of that was going to be like, and to take those opportunities when they're given. And I really love doing that show, and I love the people I do it with, and I love touring it. And it's just, it was just to continue doing that for a little bit, and then when I felt like the time was right to kind of take a step back from that and move into something else, I sort of feel like I would know naturally when that point was. And hopefully that point would come before they were like, we're fed up with you, we don't need you anymore. But obviously the last year's changed all of that. For me, I came back to a world where it was nice to have a little bit of time off because I'd been sort of touring relentlessly for 2 years. But as someone who then had never done really any corporate stuff, I suddenly was like, great, I'm going to start virtual shows and I haven't got an audience. So I've been developing that and building that up the last few months. I kind of feel like there is the next thing will hopefully be just to continue touring and continue doing this show. I'd like to create and perform some new material at some point. There's a couple of ideas I'm working on for more theatrical things, more play type things, which some involve me, some aren't me, just me in kind of creative mode. So those I'd like to look at. And there's a TV thing I'd quite like to do at some point. I don't know what that is, but I sort of feel like I'd like to do something there in that world again. But yeah, at the minute I kind of just, I feel very lucky that if I get to keep touring and keep performing and keep playing big stages, I'll be very happy at this stage.
And how do you balance, just before we finish this off, you mentioned you have a young family. How do you balance your family life with your career? Because your career literally takes you all over the world. And I know that I've got lots of friends that have done like the cruise market, for example, and they've had this enforced break, and they've decided to like call it a day because they've realized that they've enjoyed the family time. They've realized what they've missed. But I know that you're a very family orientated person, but I know that you also spend so much time on the road. How do
Yeah,
you balance
and I'm very
that?
driven, I suppose, and ambitious. So that all comes into it. I think, I've been lucky enough for the last few years to get some really good advice from, people like Mark Halin, Dave Williamson, Jeff Hobson, Jonathan Goodwin, who are fathers and have kids and live this world as well and live this life. So that has stood me in good stead. And Andy Nyman actually has given me some amazing advice over the years on family type stuff. And I think, you're constantly, and each to their own on this, but it's a constant balance between, what I do is I go and I get to do what I love and I get to make nice money doing that. So I get to live in a nice house with my family and do nice things and that sort of stuff. So that, our lifestyle equates to me having to work. But that becomes out of when I'm away, then it sucks. And it's probably easier for me because I can compartmentalize it better than my wife who's stuck at home with 2 kids trying to have them look after. But when I'm back, I'm properly back and I'm here the whole time. And I'm not, when I'm back, and if you average it throughout a year, I probably am home more than someone who was working 9 to 5 and saw their kids in the morning and the evening and occasionally at weekends because I get these big lumps of time where I'm back. And we, touch wood, we've been lucky up to this point where I was never away for more than 6 weeks without them coming to where I am or me coming back home to where they were. And when my wife was taking maternity leave and the kids were young, it's great. We spent Christmas in New York, we spent Christmas in Australia, and they would just come out and we'd spend the time and it would be great. And as the kids get older, that starts to change because of school and my wife's jobs and those sorts of things. So there's lots of thoughts and theories behind it all, and I think you just kind of end up having to do what feels right. And sometimes the answer it becomes a financial thing. It's like, well, we need the money, so we've got to do it. And and sometimes you're like, okay, well, actually, I don't need to do that. Or, luckily I could go, oh, could Wes do that one? That thing of training someone up to do me means like, if I was offered 6 months on tour and there weren't any breaks, I could go, can I get those 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks off? And we'll bring Wes in and we haven't got to retech anything. And, I've been, I've been fortunate to build that position that allows me to do that. But yeah, it does, I think it all comes down to where you are in different stages in life. I feel like I'd be very upset with my life if my kids then get older and didn't get to come and see me do shows and travel the world with me at those times. I think they loved it as when they were younger, but have no memories of it. And I'd like that to continue as they get older. I think there's a point, a phrase we use often is this is the life we chose. So therefore you either have to change your life or just suck it up sometimes. And it'll be very interesting when stuff starts to come back. And, I'm so looking forward to getting back in the West End, but also there's a bit of me that's really scared about, having spent all this time at home to then not be at home with the kids and stuff and knowing they'll miss me and I'll miss them and all of that, having to build up all of those strengths and reserves and strategies again. But, yes, that's obviously a hardship and it's the thing you don't realize until you become a dad. You're like, oh yeah, I've got to think about that now. But I'm incredibly privileged to get to go and be away from them because I get to go and do what I love and be on stage in front of thousands of people and do the one thing I've always wanted to do since I was little. So I feel very lucky that is the reason I have to go away, is to do that. But what a lucky place that I have to be in to do something a bit crappy, which is leave them. But also sometimes, like you might hear them screaming in the background now. Sometimes it's nice to have an evening off.
It's very true. I can totally relate to that. Chris, this has been an amazing interview, and I really honestly, you have delivered a masterclass in.
Oh, you're very kind.
No, it's true. Anybody that is interested in wanting to actually make something of their career, they absolutely should watch this interview and what you've accomplished. I know. I know you keep saying, oh, well, you've done so much. I mean, you've done so much in a very short period of time, and what you've accomplished is just brilliant. So,
oh, thank you. Well, here's the interesting thing, actually, when you say that, is that you're right, and I'm so lucky that I have done so much. And I suppose it all comes out down to this thing I was talking about, like this superpower when you were young, is that you sort of have no fear. And now I have the fear in that you say you've done so much. I'm like, oh, yeah, isn't that wonderful? What if that's it? What if I got nothing out? What, I never know what's next. And that is, the fear I've always had since leaving Radio 1 and doing this full time. Like, what's next? How do I, provide for the family. Though, there's a terrifying point midway through lockdown where I was getting no government support and savings were running out, and you're like, oh my god, what am I going to do? And you find a way to get through it. And I suppose within that idea of like having no fear is a superpower when you're younger, maybe when you're older, I just need to sort of bit of like therapy for me. This I need to reconnect with that again, that fear of like, oh well, what if that is it? And go, okay, well that's the fear. So use that fear to drive me forward to make sure that what I've done isn't all I'm going to do, and I work on whatever's next. But yeah, it's sort of terrifying for all of us all the time because you're like, what's the next gig? When's that going to be?
Yeah, I mean, you're thinking on this on an entirely another level, but it's something that every single performer that's full time is thinking of. Like, when's my next gig coming in? Oh my gosh, what happens if the work dries up? What happens if, it's a fear that a lot of magicians have.
And the last year's really brought that fear to life, hasn't it? Because I suppose, like a lot of people, I always had the thought, like, okay, well, if stuff starts to slow down, I'll sort of be aware of it slowing down, and then can work out where I might need to pivot my skills and resources to, and what I can do instead. When suddenly it was like, all right, everything stopped, your industry's dead, goodbye. And it's amazing to be here now talking about, in theory, hopefully, touch wood, I'll be doing West End show again in a few weeks' time. And the fact that it's my 4th West End run is utterly incredible. And every time I do it, there's always me that goes, oh, well, this will never get to do this again. And maybe that I never will. But it's constantly just keep trying to push forward. I think that's all we can do.
Absolutely.
Your motto for what a great point. Yeah, just keep pushing forward, everyone. We'll get there. God.
Well, if anybody, you've mentioned before, you love giving people advice. If anybody's watched this and they want to reach out to you, can they do that, Chris?
Yeah, feel free to get in touch. My email's on my website. Just use that, or Twitter, or Instagram, or Facebook. I'm on all that. You did that, and there's it's sort of a little secret, I suppose. I am lucky enough to be good friends with Penn from Penn and Teller. And one of the reasons that friendship came around is because we had a mutual friend, and we emailed, and long story, I won't go into it, but we're friends. But it all comes down to an initial in the email. And Penn told me a great thing, that he sends fan emails to anything he sees and likes. And he'll send them an email saying, oh, I like that, whatever it was. I was like, oh, that's nice. And it's nice coming, like, as a person to receive that. You're like, oh, that's from Penn and Teller. But also just nice to get that from anyone. And actually, I realized that, yes, I think I do a similar thing, in that if I see something that I like, I try and let that person know that I thought it was excellent. And, one of the reasons I did some work on Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is because when I first saw it, I sent Jamie or Chris an email saying, that was amazing. It's the best thing I've seen magically on stage for God knows how long. Congratulations. Just a fan email saying, well done, I think you did excellent work. And then we stayed in touch through that. So I think, and equally, when I was at Radio 1, not a week would go by where I wouldn't get emails from someone saying, can I come and sit in the studio and watch the show? And there was always, an element of people wanting just to be near celebrities within that. So and equally, there's people like me who would email and get to go and sit in on shows, who loved radio and stuff. So my response was always the same. And I'd email back and say, I'm really busy at the minute. Email me in 2 weeks' time and I'll see what I can do. And 95% of people never emailed me back. But the 5% that did email me back, I'd arrange for them to come and sit in the studio, because they're the people that want it enough. So I suppose what I'm saying is, email me. I'll say I'm busy and then email me again. But yeah, no, I'm more than happy to help out, because I feel like the best advice I've got is from other people, and maybe I've got something to offer. And so, yeah, if you have any questions or things I can help with, please do get in touch. And maybe one day I'll do a lecture or a book or something like that.
The point that you made there, I can absolutely attest to that, because this all came about. I contacted you and said, we'd like to do an interview, and you went, I'm busy. And then,
which actually I genuinely was busy at that point. But also it's my
so nice about it. I'm saying you're busy. You were really nice about it. And then out the blue, and I wasn't expecting, you just messaged me going, love the Mark Kaling interview.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I didn't see that coming. I mean, that was so nice for you to say. You didn't have to say that.
And also, that's that thing I was saying. It's like, if I see something and I like it, chances are, and I easily know how to contact someone who's involved in it, chances are I'll send an email and just say I thought that was great.
Yeah.
Because I think people, it's so easy, particularly on the internet these days, it's easier than ever to find out how much people hate your stuff. And actually, sometimes people are like stuff you don't hear that, and I think it's a nice thing to say. Like your interview, Mark Kaling, I loved, genuinely brilliant. Like, having spent a lot of time with Mark, I loved hearing him talk, but also I heard him tell stories and give advice in interviews that I'd never heard before, and I felt you should know that what a great job it was. But then, yeah, out of that comes this.
Exactly. And I really, and again, we've come full circle. I really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate being asked. It's always flat. It kind of, it's I think there's an element of inherently within my performances always there's a self-deprecating thing, but that comes out of the truth in that I'm genuinely flattered to be asked because I kind of feel like I've got nothing to say, and it's always nice to hear someone go, "Oh yeah, actually you do have something to say." So thank you for that.
Is that
it's come a love in, hasn't it? Oh God, someone's gonna vomit.
Well, is that an element? Very quickly before we finish, and I've been wrapping this up for the last. Is
they'll never end this interview. This is it for life. This is our life now.
Is that an element of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, probably.
I see so many magicians that struggle with imposter syndrome, and it's a question that comes up on my channel a lot. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? I can't imagine anyone would think someone who's, been on the West End 4 times, literally traveled the world on the biggest stages, achieved the success that you have. The thought of you having an element of imposter syndrome just baffles me.
I think it's all totally imposter syndrome. And I think, so I think probably some of the best people I know probably suffer from a similar thing. And, it's like you go, yeah, I've toured these big stages, but I've not toured it under my name. And I know I've only got to play those stages because of those shows rather than them booking me. But also there's the realization and the humility and the awareness of that I am there to serve the show and make the show as good as it can be. I'm not there to serve Chris Cox. I want to be great and I want people to remember me, but I want the show to be the star. So I will do what I can to make the show the star in any show that I'm in, because that's my job at that point. It's not about me. But that imposter syndrome type thing fits into that. I go, well, I didn't play those stages under my name, and I'd like to. Obviously, we all would, and probably maybe I will, maybe I won't. Probably won't get the chance, but you never know. But yeah, it does. Yeah, I think all of us have imposter syndrome, and I think particularly with magic, that a lot of people don't, or at least maybe don't. I don't. I think my imposter syndrome is probably evident in many ways on stage because I self-deprecate and I undercut myself. But I specifically do that because I don't want to be the guy that goes, look what I can do that you can't. And that sort of turns me off as an audience member. And I want the audience on my side. So it all kind of links in within that world. And I think inherently as a magician, you're just showing off, right? You're showing something that you can do that someone can't, or that you've learned to do. And if you can, I think, certainly for me, I feel like undercutting that is a way to connect with an audience. And it depends, it very much depends on where you're performing. I read a lot of the great stuff the Jerks writes on his blog, and the way of that casual style of performance, and that way of actually you do need to. I think my character that I have on stage probably wouldn't work in a close-up world because I think it's too. You need to be slightly more alpha in that world. I think probably, and I could be wrong, but I feel like there's too much. My character has too many flaws and weaknesses in that world to fully be able to command those 6 people at that table. Where on stage I'm sort of bulletproof in that character.
Absolutely. And again, that comes back down to knowing your character and knowing the environment in which you perform, which we've talked about. And
doing it enough that you've got responses for every type of thing that someone can say, oh, your gut instinct is good enough to come up with a response at that time for that thing. And you go, all right, that's a new one I can keep using. All those things, I don't think there's anything I've said really, which is probably new. We've probably all heard it a million times in various forms from other people who are good at what they do. But the reason everyone says it is because it's sort of true.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And Chris, that is an amazing way to end this interview. I am going to wrap it up now, just because I know that you're busy and you've got something else that you need to run off to. But again, thank you so much for coming on the channel. I encourage everybody to do 3 things. 2 things. 1, check out the link and go and buy tickets. I am going. I'm getting my tickets. I'm taking my son with me. He has never been to the theatre before, and he absolutely loves magic, and he couldn't be more excited. So, I'm definitely going to be there. And I want everyone to book tickets to that because it's going to be amazing. So I want people to support you, and also leave a comment down below. I'm sure Chris will see it. So if you've got a comment, leave it down below, and I'm sure he'll see it.
And I'll try and log in, and if there's any questions, I'll try and I haven't answered them I'll try and answer them as well. So pop your comment there, or also hit subscribe to Craig's channel, obviously.
Hey, that's amazing. Yes, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, leave a like, and I'm going to be back again tomorrow with another video. But Chris, thanks for joining me. You're amazing.
You're amazing.
We are amazing. How's that? We're amazing.
Yes.